feel like I should have a new outfit for every appearance on the stage, like I'm presenting the Oscars or something, but the dress allowance from Web Summit didn't extend to that. So my guest in this session is Rob Mee, who was the founder of Pivotal Labs, a software development consultancy which was a very early adopter of agile development methodologies, which are now mainstream. And he's also the CEO of Pivotal, which encompasses not only Pivotal Labs, but a suite of products for developers such as Cloud Foundry and the Big Data Suite, Green Plum, Gemfire, and so on. So Rob, for people who are not developers in the audience, can you explain a little bit about Pivotal Labs development methodology and how you make software?
Sure. It's really based around very quick feedback loops. So there are a lot of practices that within the methodology that enforce this and encourage this. So people pair program all day, so they're giving each other feedback.
So can you maybe explain what pair programming is, first of all?
Yes, so it's two people for an entire workday at one computer, sharing that computer and talking their way through problems. So typically one person is typing and the other one is looking at what they're doing and talking, sort of saying driving and navigating, you can think of it that way. But the relationship between the two of them is very fluid, so they might switch, just like we're having a conversation, and they don't really need to officially do that, so it's just like you and I can go back and forth and interrupt each other and have a conversation. That's kind of what the pair programming mode is like. Someone takes over, the other person takes over, and it goes back and forth like that.
And also your developers move around within the team and do different roles and work on different things, right?
Yes, and so while the people pair, they're not sort of pair bonded with anybody. They're rotating pretty much every day and pairing with someone else.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you started off working with 2/3 startups for the vast majority of the lifetime of Pivotal Labs, but now you're working 80% with corporates.
Yeah.
So how have you had to change how you work to deal with, first of all, more complex pieces of software, like the ones you develop yourselves, like Cloud Foundry and the Big Data Suite, and the ones you develop for your clients, and also dealing with maybe a company which has a bigger development team than you do?
Yeah. Well, working with startups, we were often, sort of helping them build their initial team, get to market with an MVP, and get on a sort of a predictable, reliable, transparent process that they could take on their own and evolve on their own after we were gone. And if you take that to a larger enterprise world, they have a lot of pre-existing teams. Some of them are quite large. Some of them have really entrenched processes. You're not really starting from a clean slate most of the time. So what that turns into is really a transformation kind of an engagement. And we work with the enterprises to move to this sort of startup way of working. But that involves all kinds of things organizationally, and helping them hire and changing perhaps the way they do HR. And when they've done that transformation, they're fundamentally working in a different way. They're doing product development in a different way.
Because you actually bring their development team into your offices and have them work with your developers doing pair programming and so on.
Yeah, we generally like to get them out of their everyday routine, out of their scheduled meetings, and put them in an immersive, supportive environment where they're doing things a completely new way. And then we find that it takes about 3 months for them to internalize everything that we're doing in this new way. They can then take that back into their organization and propagate it themselves and be their own change agents.
And when you were working with startups as well, you were generally working on smaller software projects. Even your own products like Pivotal Tracker aren't hugely complex, whereas the software you have now is. Yeah. So how did you have to change your own processes in order to accommodate that?
Well, it's interesting. We took advantage of these tight feedback loops and the evolutionary nature of the way that we do things. I mean, we're always reviewing how we do things. The method itself is subject to those feedback loops and subject to change all the time. So with Cloud Foundry, it was already a pretty large team when I got it. It was something that moved over from VMware into Pivotal, and really about 50 people, and we took it up to 250 now. And as we grew, we had a lot of interesting things that we learned to get to, over 200 engineers on one team, including sort of rather than small teams that would do everything and do every function themselves, such as release engineering and ops and all of those kinds of things. We did have to extrude these functions into new teams and make up these teams. but each of these specialized functional teams had a mandate that they were to automate themselves out of existence.
Okay.
And because the problem continues to grow in complexity and expand, we may not ever be able to eliminate those specialized teams, but because they have the mandate to do so, they continue to evolve very rapidly as well. And of course, we pair there and we rotate engineers through it. So they're never isolated into specialized functions that grow into sort of a fiefdom within an organization.
So because you worked with a lot of startups and now you're working more with big companies, like larger companies are often being told you must be more like a startup, you have to change the way, you have to be more agile, you have to do all this kind of stuff. But like, what are the advantages that larger corporates have if they do want to compete against people who might want to take their business, whether those are small new companies or competitors?
Right. I mean, a lot of enterprises are facing this, disrupt or be disrupted. The constant fear of being disrupted by startups, and the reality is that most of these startups are working with a more modern development methodology, agile, lean, et cetera. That's mainstream in the startup world. They're working with modern cloud technologies, and so these enterprises really need to learn how to develop that way. It's quite true. The good thing is that I think Pivotal is we can help them move down that path to a modern development methodology using a modern cloud platform. And when they get there, and they can develop as well or better than Google or Uber or whoever else they might be competing with, they have the advantage because some of them have decades, if not 100 years of experience in a vertical domain. That specialized knowledge is very, very valuable. That institutional knowledge is very valuable. And I feel that if they can get to the transformation of becoming a software company with all of that knowledge, then how can the startups compete with them? Right?
And I think that's something that's often not acknowledged within the startup world or even at conferences like this one.
Yeah.
Like I'm interviewing the guy in charge of IBM Watson, for example, later on today, and IBM would be considered to be a more stodgy company, still the image in comparison with Google, but they're doing amazing things.
Yes.
So it's the same stuff.
Yep.
You have a very characteristic way of working within Pivotal, which you've talked a bit about.
Yeah.
But do you think that non-development teams can also learn from the way that you do your work?
I do. It's really about this collaboration that's so close, and we have developers pair program. We have designers pairing as well. We have product managers pairing. And the really interesting thing about taking collaboration to an extreme and collaborating essentially all day long is that the culture within the company is sort of spread as a byproduct. So people are
in a one-to-one way, actually.
One-to-one, and then you switch with someone else, and you're solving problems all day, debating how to solve those problems, relying on the underlying philosophy of your methodology, of the process, and that helps reinforce a consistent culture that everyone understands and shares and evolves.
You said that one journalist actually told you that you'd managed to develop some kind of software cult.
Yes, yes, but it's not a cult because everything is questioned all the time.
Okay.
So there's the difference for it.
And one byproduct of this is the way you hire, right? So
Yeah.
you said because of this really close collaboration, that one of the first things you hire for is not just technical skill, but empathy.
That's right.
So how do you do that? How can you tell from how do you gauge somebody's empathy from a 1-hour interview?
Well, it's interesting. It's very much of a hands-on interview, one-on-one, and this is something that I started with software engineers many years ago and evolved over time. I've done it about 2,000 times myself, and I don't, in the very beginning, I don't really think I was necessarily recognizing that I was hiring for empathy, but over time, I came to understand how closely you could measure that, and the real reason is that within that 1-hour interview, I'm kind of asking them to do things that they're not accustomed to doing. They're not hard. There are no trick questions, but I'm asking them to think in ways that they haven't normally thought in the past. And you can really tell someone's empathy. It's more about, can they get inside my head, understand how I'm thinking and feeling about the problem that I'm solving, rather than just solve the problem themselves. And that actually is fairly straightforward to test. If you ask them things that they're not accustomed to doing, can they sync with you and do that?
So it sounds like it's a combination of kind of openness and then empathy to try and figure out what you're trying to get at or what you're trying to do.
Yes, you really do have to be open to a new way of doing things, and I think that is empathy. It's not your way, it's what's the other person.
Trying to understand how someone else does something and why, I suppose. Okay. One of the biggest contributions, I think, of agile development was that it addressed some of the myths of software development. So I have a software development background myself, and when I came into the industry, and you still have a little bit of this, it was this image of like pizza and Coke and all-nighters, and there was no way you could ever make a deadline unless you were working crazy hours. Right. And your method of working is actually about sustainable development and working 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or whatever. Yeah. So, like, are there other myths of software development that you think that are still out there, but you think that your thinking is counter to, basically?
Yeah, I think the biggest myth that I'm seeing these days is that people really think that Silicon Valley is where everything happens. I still see venture capital firms telling their startups that they need to move to Silicon Valley to get to the best talent. And for me, if you look at Silicon Valley, we're based in San Francisco. We have offices in Silicon Valley as well. But oftentimes when people talk about Silicon Valley, they're talking about San Francisco as well. And what that really tells you is that Silicon Valley is not really a location anymore as much as a state of mind, and it's how you do things, not where you do them. And you can develop that way in Tokyo, and you can do it in London. And to think that you need to go to San Francisco just to hire talent, I think that's crap. Why can't you do it in Dublin, right?
Which is now what you're going to do.
That's what we're doing.
All right.
Yeah.
And actually this is something that's quite annoying, especially for us here over in Europe, because especially this phenomenon of investors saying you must move to Silicon Valley in order to do anything, even though a lot of the best technical talent is actually here. Yeah,
and that's what we're seeing. We're not, we have, I think we'll be at 17 offices by the end of the year, and we really don't see that the talent is concentrated in Silicon Valley. So we can find it where we go.
Good to hear, and good luck with the new office in Ireland.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.